The wind crawled low across the bones of Dry Hollow, dragging dust in its teeth. It howled between broken shutters and creaked the warped boards of old storefronts that hadn't seen a paying customer in weeks. There had once been promise here, silver in the soil, cattle fattening under big skies. But that promise had dried up like everything else. Now, the town lay cracked and hollow, its people moving like ghosts in the daylight and locking their doors before the sun dipped behind the Red Canyon cliffs to the west. Dry Hollow had no law anymore. The sheriff's badge had gone missing right along with the man who wore it, and no one had dared hang another on the wall of the station since. Folks didn't speak much about what happened, just that the Blood Ridge gang came one day and made sure no one would speak again. Since then, the gang rode through town whenever they pleased. Drunk, loud, laughing like devils. Every man kept his head low, every mother clutched her child tighter, and every prayer whispered at night ended the same way. Asterisk, don't let them stop here tonight. Asterisk, Clara May knew better than most how brutal peace was. Her ranch sat on the edge of town, a small two-room homestead with splintered fencing and a dry well. She managed it herself since her husband died in a flash flood 3 springs ago. Her daughter, Lily, was only 10 but carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who'd already seen too much. Clara kept her close, always in reach, always watching the horizon for riders. Every chore was done with one ear tuned to the sound of hooves. That morning, Clara had brought Lily into town for sugar and salt, what little they could afford. The general store was nearly empty. The shopkeeper barely made eye contact as he passed the goods across the counter. No one stayed too long in one place anymore. Clara noticed the way his hand trembled when he handed her change. She thanked him, nodded once, and led Lily out into the sun-baked street. And that's when she saw him. He stepped down from the stagecoach like it owed him something, dragging one foot behind the other, his boot worn through at the heel. Dust clung to him like shadow. His coat was old and gray, the kind of gray that used to be black before it lost the will. A wide brim had covered most of his face, but what little skin showed was sun-leathered and cracked. A crooked cigar burned between his teeth, the smoke curling around a sharp, tired jaw. He didn't say a word, just looked around like he was counting memories instead of buildings. Then he started walking slowly toward the saloon, each step marked by the dull thump of his boot dragging across packed earth. Clara held Lily close as he passed. The girl looked up at the man with wide eyes, but he didn't return the stare. He glanced at Clara instead, for just a breath, something unreadable flickering in the tarnished gold of his eyes. Then he was gone, swallowed by the swinging doors of the saloon. Inside, the piano had been silent for months. The barkeep, a wiry man with red knuckles, watched him enter with a mix of curiosity and dread. "Need a room?" the man rasped. His voice sounded like gravel rolling downhill. The barkeep hesitated, then nodded toward the stairs. "2 bits a night. Don't want no trouble." "Neither do I." He took the key without another word and climbed the stairs, each footfall hollow and slow. The town whispered about him by sundown. No one knew his name, but by morning someone had heard the barkeep mumble it under his breath. Gun shelling. A strange name, but not stranger than the man himself. He didn't drink, didn't gamble. He sat in the same chair on the balcony every evening, cigar smoke drifting into the dusk like a signal only he understood. From that perch, he watched everything, especially Clara and Lily. He never approached them, but he was always there. When they passed by the saloon, Clara could feel his eyes following them like a shadow stretching toward something lost. It should have unsettled her, but it didn't. Not quite. There was something heavy in his stare, but not cruel. If anything, it felt like mourning, like a man sitting at a graveyard without a headstone. Old Tom, the blacksmith, claimed he recognized him. "That there's the ghost of Barrel's Crossing," he whispered over a hammer and nail. "Fastest hand this side of the Devil's Spit. Used to take down outlaws before breakfast. Then one day he just vanished, poof. Thought he was dead." Clara didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in men who'd seen too much. Gun shelling looked like a man who'd walked through fire and didn't care whether he made it out. And still, every time Lily smiled in his direction, he looked away like the sun had burned his eyes. One evening, as the wind pulled pink clouds across the horizon, Clara caught him watching them again. She stopped, holding Lily's small hand in hers, and looked up to meet his gaze for the first time. His expression didn't change, but he didn't look away either. "Can I wave at him?" Lily asked softly. Clara hesitated, then nodded. The girl lifted her hand and gave a small, earnest wave. Gun shelling didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, he raised 2 fingers in return, the barest motion of acknowledgement. Smoke curled from his cigar, glowing like embered sorrow. Clara turned and led her daughter home, but she glanced back once more. He was still there, still watching. Not like a man guarding something, but like a man waiting for something to return. Whatever storm had carried him into Dry Hollow hadn't passed. Not yet. And Clara had the sinking feeling that when it finally broke, it would tear something wide open, something buried long ago and left to rot in silence. The sun dipped below the canyon rim. The saloon balcony darkened. Gun shelling lit another cigar, the flame briefly revealing the corner of a scar that cut from jaw to ear. And still he waited. The heat pressed down hard that afternoon, baking the wood of storefronts until the paint blistered and peeled. The sky hung low and white, not a cloud in sight, the kind of oppressive stillness that made the town feel like it had stopped breathing. Flies buzzed lazily through the market stalls. Chickens clucked somewhere behind a fence. The smell of dust and horses was thick in the air. Clara May stood beside the vegetable cart, one hand clutching Lily's shoulder, the other holding a nearly empty basket. They'd managed a few potatoes, some corn, a jar of molasses. The coin purse in Clara's dress was lighter than she liked. Her eyes stayed wary, darting from one empty street to another. Even the shopkeepers moved quick today, nervous and terse, as if the wind had whispered a warning. And then came the thunder, not from the sky, but from hooves, dozens of them, pounding the dirt like a war drum. The sound bounced off the buildings, growing louder, closer, until the Blood Ridge gang poured into town like a mudslide of leather and iron. Dust clouded the air behind them, and laughter rose above the thrum, sharp, jagged laughter that curdled blood. Clara's breath caught. She grabbed Lily tighter and moved instinctively to the side of the cart, trying to make themselves small, invisible. But it was already too late. Royce Threekill, Maddox, led the charge, riding high on a blood-brown stallion, his long duster flaring behind him. His silver spurs gleamed. A red bandana hung loose around his throat, and 2 revolvers gleamed at his hips. His beard was coarse and black, streaked with gray, and his eyes were pale blue, the color of frostbite. The name Threekill wasn't a boast, it was a habit. Royce never shot once. The horses slowed as the gang spilled into the market square. There were 12 of them today, maybe more. Faces Clara didn't recognize, younger ones full of liquor and cruelty. They laughed like schoolboys, but their eyes were hollow. Royce dismounted with a grunt and stretched his shoulders, his boots hitting the ground like anvils. He sniffed the air and smiled. "Well now, ain't this a cozy little grave of a town?" he drawled. Lily hid behind Clara's skirt, peeking with wide eyes. Royce's gaze swept across the square, then locked on Clara. "Miss May," he said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Still raising ghosts and potatoes?" Clara didn't respond. Her jaw tightened. He sauntered closer, drawing out the moment like a cat circling a cornered bird. Another outlaw stepped forward, tall and twitchy, with a scar under one eye. He snatched the basket from Clara's hands and turned it upside down, spilling the corn and potatoes into the dirt. "Oops," he grinned. Clara flinched, but didn't bend to retrieve anything. Lily whimpered. "You must be the little Rose," Royce said, crouching down to Lily's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Clara stepped in front of her. "She don't talk to men like you." Royce rose slowly. Then maybe she should learn some manners. He turned to the gang. "Ain't that right, boys?" Laughter exploded from the saddles. And then something shifted, barely noticeable at first. A hush rolled like a ripple through the square. One of the younger riders stopped mid-laugh, his eyes drawn to a figure leaning against a beam outside the saloon. There he stood, gun shelling, silent as ever, one boot flat, the other dragging its familiar limp. His hat was low, shadowing his face. A thin trail of smoke rose from the crooked cigar between his lips. His arms hung at his sides, relaxed, indifferent. But his gaze was fixed. Royce turned. His eyebrows lifted with recognition, then amusement. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, spreading his arms. The ghost of the barrel himself. A few of the gang exchanged confused glances. "You boys don't know him," Royce said, stepping toward Schelling. "Used to be faster than lightning struck a barn. They say he killed 17 men, with 17 bullets in the time it took a dog to sneeze. Then he disappeared, vanished like smoke." Schelling said nothing. Royce stopped a few feet from him, tilted his head. "What happened to you, Schelling? Did time catch up? Or did you just lose your nerve?" The cigar shifted slightly as Schelling took a breath. Still no words. Royce smiled coldly. "You still smoking that same Rotgut tobacco?" He reached forward and smacked the cigar clean from Schelling's mouth. It hit the dirt with a soft hiss, ash and ember crumbling into the dust. The town held its breath. Schelling didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he bent down, picked up the cigar, and gently brushed the dirt from the end with 2 fingers. He relit it with a match from his coat pocket, took a slow drag, exhaled. He never once looked at Royce. Lily watched him from behind her mother's legs. Her lips were parted just slightly, as if she could hear something the others couldn't. Clara felt it too, a tension, a thread pulled taut, humming through the heat. Royce stared at Schelling for a beat longer, his smirk twitching. "Well," he said at last, turning back to his horse. "Turns out ghosts don't talk much. Let's go, boys. Nothing here worth wasting lead on." The gang mounted up, still laughing, though less raucously now. As they rode out, the dust followed them like a veil, covering the market in grit and silence. Clara watched them disappear, her heart pounding in her throat. Schelling remained against the beam, unmoving, eyes unreadable behind the smoke. He didn't look at Clara. He didn't need to. She felt it in her bones. Something had changed. That wasn't humiliation, not for him. That was something else. That was calculation. A storm wasn't coming. It had already arrived, and it was just waiting for the right second to strike. By morning, the dust from the gang's hooves still hung in the air like the stench of something rotting. Dry Hollow didn't speak of what happened the day before, but the silence weighed heavier than words. Men moved with their heads low, women with tighter grips on their children. Doors closed a little faster. Curtains fell quicker across windows. The townsfolk were used to fear. It had become a second skin, but something else now stirred beneath it. The fear of what might come next. It wasn't just Royce Maddox they were afraid of. It was what a man like Gun Schelling might do. They came to him one by one. The butcher, the banker, even the preacher, whose voice shook as he muttered about keeping peace in the Lord's name. Each of them whispered some version of the same plea. Don't stir trouble. Don't provoke him. Don't bring fire down on the town again. Schelling listened to them all from his chair on the saloon balcony. He didn't argue. He didn't nod. He just smoked, the cigar hanging steady between his lips, the ash growing long. He ain't what he used to be, someone muttered behind cupped hands. Age took his speed. Royce'll kill him before he gets the gun halfway drawn, another said. No one spoke that loudly near Schelling, though, because there was something about him, something in the way he sat, quiet and carved from dust, that made even fools think twice. As the sun dipped low, turning the canyon walls red and gold, he stayed where he always did, watching the street. Below, the world moved in cautious steps. Above, he sat unmoving, smoke curling like ghost fingers around his weathered face. That was when Clara came. Her footsteps were light but sure. She held a small tin cup, steam rising from its rim. She didn't speak until she was beside him, and even then, her voice was quiet. Didn't figure you for the kind who likes company. Schelling took the cup without looking at her. He sipped slowly. Didn't figure you for the kind who'd offer it. She leaned against the rail beside him, arms crossed, eyes forward. Lily thinks you're a quiet angel, she said after a pause. Says you ain't like the others. Says you're watching over us. Schelling's jaw shifted slightly, the muscles tightening as he exhaled smoke through his nose. She's wrong, he said. No, Clara said, her voice firmer now. She ain't. A long silence passed between them. Down in the street, a dog barked and a door slammed. Distant wind pulled a loose sign, making it creak like an old tree branch ready to snap. Finally, Clara spoke again. "You knew someone like her, didn't you?" Schelling looked out past the town, toward the canyons. "I had a girl once," he said, "a little older than Lily, and a woman who looked like you. Strong, bright, spoke soft but hit hard when needed." "What happened?" "They burned." Clara said nothing, but her hand, resting near his on the rail, flinched ever so slightly. "Church fire," he continued, voice like gravel rubbed into old wounds. "Royce Maddox said it. Wanted to make a point. Said if I didn't back down, he'd light up the whole town. I didn't back down." "You were the sheriff?" "I was more than that." He took another sip of the coffee. "I was the one they feared. Until the fire took everything. I vanished after that. There wasn't anything left to be." Clara looked at him, and for the first time, he met her gaze fully. There were oceans in his eyes, storms without end, griefs too deep to name. "I ain't asking you to be anything again," she said, "but she watches you like you matter. And I guess I just wanted you to know that." She turned to go. "Clara." She stopped. "If I draw again," he said, "there's no turning back. No going slow." Clara didn't look away. "Then don't miss." That night, old Tom nursed a bottle behind the livery, muttering into the darkness, while a few wide-eyed boys listened from the shadows. "Y'all talk like that man's just some old drifter," he said, spitting. "But I seen what he did at Eagle Pass. 7 Comanche, 7 shots, 1 breath between. His hand don't shake. His gun don't jam. He don't run out of bullets. He runs out of enemies." One of the boys whispered, "But he's old now." Tom narrowed his eyes. "Old's just more years of knowing exactly where to put a bullet." The next morning, the sun rose sharp and pale. Schelling sat on the balcony again, only this time, the coffee cup was gone. In its place sat a cloth bundle, tied neat. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a revolver, his revolver, cold, gleaming, untouched since the night the fire took his life away. He ran his fingers over the grip, worn smooth by years of use. He opened the chamber, checked each round, then closed it with a click that echoed louder than church bells in the dead morning quiet. Then he began to clean it. The townsfolk watched from behind shutters and fences. No one spoke. No one moved. The sight of him with that weapon was like seeing the past rise up, dusted off and dressed for war. He worked with precision, the movements memorized by time and grief. With every sweep of the cloth, something inside him seemed to return. Not rage, not vengeance, purpose. By the time the sun reached its peak, the gun gleamed like judgment, and the man who held it was no longer just a ghost. He was waiting. It started with the thunder again, only this time, it was heavier, darker, like it carried death in its wake. The town square trembled as 20 riders charged in from the canyon pass, their horses kicking up a storm of red dust that swallowed the horizon. Royce Maddox rode at the front, teeth bared like a wolf. Sunlight flashed off his pistols, and his laughter echoed off the buildings like gunfire. Behind closed shutters, townsfolk clutched their children and prayed. They knew what this meant. The Blood Ridge gang didn't ride 20 strong unless they planned on leaving something burning behind. Clara and Lily had only just stepped out of the mercantile when the gang surrounded them. Clara spun, arms out, but it was too late. A wiry outlaw grabbed Lily and yanked her from her mother's grasp, lifting the girl like a sack of grain. Lily screamed, arms flailing. Clara lunged after her, but another man struck her to the ground with the back of his hand. She hit the dirt hard, blood in her mouth, hair wild, reaching for her daughter. "Let her go," she shouted, voice breaking. Royce dismounted, boots crunching over the stones. He swaggered forward, grinning down at Clara. "Where's your ghost now, girl?" he barked. "That old sack of bones you keep watching from the balcony? We spit on old legends." The gang erupted in laughter, a chorus of jackals under the noonday sun. Royce yanked Lily by the collar and lifted her to eye level. She kicked and cried, twisting in his grip, but he didn't flinch. "Pretty little thing," he said. "Shame about her mother's mouth. Maybe she'll be quieter." Behind them, the saloon doors creaked. The laughter didn't stop, not at first. But it faltered. Gun Shelling walked into the square alone, each step slow and deliberate, boot dragging its familiar scrape through the dust. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. The sun caught the glint of metal at his side, the revolver, cleaned and polished, holstered for judgment. He stopped at the center of the square, right where the shadow of the old town bell used to fall at high noon. Royce stared, almost disappointed. Well, look at this. The ghost shows up after all. Shelling said nothing. The smoke from his cigar curled around his face, lit orange in the harsh light. His eyes never left Lily. You got one last shot in that rusty arm of yours. Royce called, 'cause it's gonna take a whole damn miracle to walk out of here alive. The town held its breath. Shelling reached up, took the cigar from his lips. He looked at Royce for the first time, not like a man facing a rival, but like a man who had already decided how this ends. He spit the cigar into the dust. Now count your seconds. What followed wasn't a gunfight. It was a reckoning. The first shot cracked like lightning off canyon walls. Before Royce could even blink, the man to his left dropped, shot clean through the temple. A second shot. Another outlaw crumpled, revolver still holstered. Third, fourth, fifth, each echo sharper than the last. In 3 seconds, 5 men lay dead in the dust, blood soaking into the ground where children once played. The gang scattered, startled shouts twisting into panic. Shelling moved like water, fluid, unhurried. He turned, pivoted, fired. Another man fell. Then another. Horses screamed. Riders bolted down alleys. 2 tried to climb back into their saddles, but Shelling's bullets found them mid-motion. A shot came from behind a water trough, missed. Shelling returned fire without looking. The shooter's scream was brief. 10 seconds. Only Royce remained. He stood alone, dust clinging to his coat, gun drawn but unmoving. His hands trembled. The square was silent now except for the wind and the ringing in everyone's ears. Lily had stumbled to the ground, safe but shaking. Clara crawled to her and pulled her close, eyes fixed on Shelling's silhouette, like she was watching a ghost rise out of the fire. Shelling stepped forward, slow. Royce backed up, each boot step unsteady. He held his pistol, but his grip faltered. You ain't real," he stammered. Shelling kept walking. "I burned you," Royce said. "I killed your family. You died that night." Shelling stopped just inches from him. "You remember the fire?" His voice was low, raw, spoken like embers hissing on stone. Royce nodded slowly, eyes wide. Shelling looked down at the trembling man. His gun hung steady at his side. "You killed mine," he said. "Now I buried yours." Royce raised his pistol too late. The last shot rang out alone. Royce crumpled to the dirt, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in disbelief. Gun Shelling stood there a long while, smoke rising from the barrel of his revolver. He didn't say another word. He didn't look back. He just turned, slid the gun back into its holster, and walked over to Clara and Lily. The girl clung to her mother, tear-streaked, still trembling. Clara looked up at him, this broken man with smoke-stained hands and sorrow etched deep into every line on his face. She whispered, "You came." He didn't reply. He just knelt down and touched Lily's cheek, so gently it almost didn't happen. Then he rose and walked toward the edge of town alone, as the bell tower, long broken, creaked in the wind. Behind him, no one spoke. Justice had come, and it had counted every second. The wind blew warm across the town square, stirring dust and smoke as it curled up from the saloon's shattered rooftop. The scent of gunpowder hung thick in the air. From behind broken barrels and cracked doors, the people of Dry Hollow began to emerge, cautious, quiet, blinking into the golden light like survivors of some old forgotten war. Gun Shelling stood still at the center, his shoulders slow to rise with each breath. His right arm hung heavier now, the sleeve soaked through, torn at the shoulder where a bullet had whispered past bone. He didn't look down at it. He stared instead at the ground, where Royce Maddox lay motionless, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, the last sneer never quite finished. Footsteps came fast, boots scraping against wooden planks, skirts swishing in the wind. Clara reached him first, her face flushed. her hands trembling as she touched his good arm. Behind her, Lily ran straight into his side and wrapped both arms around his waist. He flinched only slightly. "You're hurt," Clara said. "I've been worse," he murmured. Lily clung tighter. "Are they gone?" Schelling looked past her. The canyon was quiet now, save for the far-off echo of horses galloping away. The dust was settling. The count had ended. "They're gone," he said. Clara's eyes welled up. I thought you'd." "I owed that girl in the church a bullet," Schelling said softly, not looking at either of them. "I just delivered it." For a moment no one spoke. The square was still, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Then old Tom stepped out from behind the corner store, hat in hand. His face was aged like the land itself, worn but knowing. "He was never dead," Tom said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Just waiting for his reason." One by one, heads nodded. Faces appeared in windows. Children peeked out from behind skirts. Even the undertaker stood on his porch, arms folded, watching the man who had once been buried in story and rumor. Gun Schelling didn't bask in the moment. He didn't even acknowledge it. He stepped away from Clara and Lily, walked with a limp toward his horse, tethered to the post near the blacksmith's. The leather saddle was cracked from heat and time. He untied the reins with one hand, quietly. Clara followed. "Where will you go?" He didn't answer right away. He mounted the horse with effort, his wounded arm stiff as stone. He settled in the saddle, adjusted his hat against the low sun. "She calls you Grandpa now," Clara said behind him. His head turned slightly, not enough to show his face, but just enough to let the words sink in. A silence stretched between them, long and thin as a desert shadow. Then, without turning back, he said, "Then I'll be back when the leaves turn." It was all he said, all he needed to say. He touched his heel gently to the horse's side, and he began to walk, slow, steady, carrying the last of the old ghosts with it. Smoke still curled behind him from the ruined saloon, drifting upward into the painted sky, like some kind of memory, not ready to leave. Lily stood beside Clara now, watching him ride away. The child didn't cry. She didn't call after him. She just stared, holding her mother's hand with one of her own, the other still curled around the empty shell casing he had slipped into her palm before he walked off. The people of Dry Hollow watched too, in silence, as if watching something sacred disappear back into the sand. A figure carved from another time, fading slowly into the golden horizon. No one cheered. No one clapped. But for the first time in a long time, there was peace. Behind them, the town breathed. Hammers would soon rise. Boards would be nailed. The saloon would be rebuilt. The windows mended. But something deeper had changed, the quiet way people now looked at Lily, the protective way they moved around Clara. The nod old Tom gave as he passed. Lily squeezed her mother's hand. Will he really come back? Clara looked out toward the desert, where the trail disappeared into firelit clouds. She smiled faintly. He always does, she said. The wind shifted again, warm and steady. It brushed over the rooftops, through broken shutters, along the chapel door, and into the hills beyond, where a lone rider, outlined against the last red light, lit a cigar with a slow, practiced hand and waited. Just like before, just like always. The schoolhouse creaked in the wind, old boards groaning like tired bones. Afternoon light slanted in through dusty windows, casting long beams across the warped floor. Chalk dust hung in the air, and at the front of the room, standing beside a battered map of the frontier, was a girl no longer a girl. Lily May had grown tall and solemn, her hair pinned up, her voice clear but touched with the kind of sorrow only time could teach. The children sat silent, their feet not quite touching the floor, breath held. Outside, the wind stirred through the rebuilt town of Dry Hollow, a town that bore no resemblance to the ruin it had once been. Lily set her hands on the edge of the desk, her fingers brushing an old brass shell casing she kept like a talisman. She looked out the window a moment before she spoke. They called him the Barrel Ghost, she said softly, but not because he haunted saloons or showed up drunk in graveyards. He wasn't a ghost like the stories tell. No rattling chains or pale sheets in the dark. He was real. He bled, and he bled for us. One of the younger boys raised a timid hand. But ghosts aren't real, right? She smiled gently. He was real enough when he walked through fire. A hush settled again. Years ago, she went on, this town was ashes. People don't like remembering it that way, but I do. I remember the smell. I remember the fear. And I remember the silence, the kind that weighs heavier than noise. We lived with that silence for a long time, until he broke it. Her voice steadied, even as her eyes misted. No one knew his name back then. They just whispered that something old was coming back. A man who never should have lived through the war. A man who burned once and never forgot how it felt. She walked slowly along the front row of desks, trailing her fingers across the wood. They say he came from the canyons, from the edge of nowhere. Some say Mexico. Others say hell. I don't think it matters. What matters is that when the town needed him, he came. Outside the window, the square stood quiet. A wooden statue stood at its center, tall, weathered, carved with care. A man in a long coat, leaning slightly on a cane. His hat tilted low. His cigar forever frozen between his fingers. They never found his body, Lily said. After Royce Maddox fell and the gang scattered, he just disappeared. Walked out of town like the dust didn't touch him. Like the blood wasn't his to carry anymore. I watched him go, standing next to my mama. I was only a child, but I saw something in his eyes that no one could forget. Not rage, not regret, just gravity. A girl in the back whispered, "Is it true he could shoot the wings off a fly at 30 paces?" Lily chuckled softly. He didn't waste bullets on flies. She turned back to the desk, picked up the casing, held it between thumb and finger. This was his last shot, the one that dropped Royce. I found it still warm in the dirt. He didn't take trophies. He left them behind. A gust of wind rattled the panes. For a moment, the room seemed to lean forward. They rebuilt the town after that, she said. Built it better, stronger. The saloon became a chapel. The gallows were torn down and turned into a schoolyard swing. Men put down rifles and picked up hammers. Women planted gardens where the dead used to lie. And every single board, every nail, was touched by the memory of what he did. She nodded toward the window. The statue came later. Folks argued about it. What pose, what wood, what words? Some wanted it to say hero. Others said protector. But in the end, they carved nothing at all. Just a man, standing still, as if waiting. The room sat quiet, reverent, the kind of silence that carried weight. Lily's voice lowered, as if she were speaking to someone beyond the walls. People ask me if I think he's still alive. I don't know. Some say he watches from the cliffs, that you can see smoke rising on Red Ridge at dusk. Just a flicker, just a shape against the sky. Watching. A few children turned their heads toward the window again. And I've wondered, she said, why he left, why he didn't stay, why someone who saved everything we had didn't ask for a thing in return. She placed the shell gently back on the desk. But then I remember, he wasn't built for peace. He was built for storms. He was justice, not mercy. He didn't come to lead. He came to finish what was started a long time ago. Lily turned, brushing chalk from her skirt, eyes shimmering. So when people ask what he was, I don't say hero. I say he was justice that took a long time getting here. She stepped away from the desk and moved toward the window, staring out past the rooftops, past the fence line, toward the distant ridges where the world turned to stone. The children followed her gaze. Far beyond the square, on the high red ridge that loomed over Dry Hollow, a shape sat silhouetted against the amber light of a dying sun. A horse. A rider. Motionless. Smoke curled up from the faint orange tip of a cigar, glowing like an ember in the gloom. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, just watched, as he always had. And then the wind rose. It rushed down the ridge, through the gullies, over the rooftops, and through the open schoolhouse window. It carried dust and memory and something else. Words that no mouth spoke, but every soul heard. Count your seconds. And then, just as quickly as it came, the wind was gone. But the silence it left behind, it felt a lot like peace.